But let me just say this: silence protects the system, but not the people. Think about that, right? Like, so I we could be silent and protect whatever the system is, whether it's a family system, an educational system, right, a political system, right, but not the people in it, because we're not being honest and straightforward. And
Before we talk about trauma, we have to acknowledge complexity. Tangled Roots explores the beauty and burden of family systems, the stories we inherit, the roles we absorb, and the patterns that shape our identities long before we're aware of them. In this episode of Tend to It, I'm joined by social worker, educator, and consultant Delories Williams for a grounded conversation about intergenerational patterns, boundaries, reconciliation, and chosen family. Together, we reflect on what it means to honor where we've come from while still choosing how we grow. Let's dig in. Welcome, loves. As always, before we begin, I want you to fully come into this space. Wherever you are, you could be driving, you could be walking, maybe you're getting ready for the holidays and doing things around the house. Take a brief pause and let yourself arrive just as you are. Now take a deep breath. I want you to inhale and exhale. I'm Aiysha Walida, licensed therapist and storyteller, and this is Tend to It, a space where we remember that mental health, like a garden, needs tending. This season is called Rooted and Rising, and together we've been exploring how the garden helps us understand our inner lives, our growth, our grief, our resilience, and our becoming. Today we are talking about roots, not just where we come from, but what we carry. Before we talk about trauma, we need to talk about complexity because family systems hold beauty and burden. They carry love, culture, tradition, faith, and they also carry silence, expectations, and patterns that shape us long before we have language for them. In the garden, tangled roots don't mean a plant is broken. They mean it has been growing, sometimes in tight spaces, sometimes without room to stretch. And our mental health works the same way. We inherit stories, we absorb roles, we learn how to survive before we learn how to heal. And that's why I'm so grateful for today's guest, someone whose life's work has been rooted in helping individuals, families, and communities tend to what's been passed down and decide what comes next for them. I'm honored to be joined by Delories Williams. Delories is a social worker, educator, and consultant with decades of experience supporting children, families, and communities. She began her career as a school social worker and later retired as director of the undergraduate social work program at the University of Southern Mississippi, where she now holds the title of instructor emeritus. Her work has been recognized through honors such as Educator of the Year, Outstanding Faculty, and Mentor Awards, a Family Strengthening Award, and a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Association of Social Workers. Today, she is the founder of Delories Williams Consulting and Training, partners with schools, nonprofits, and organizations to strengthen systems of care. She serves as president of the Williams Family Foundation and is also a co-host of the podcast In the Meantime, where she shares reflections on growth, purpose, and life's in-between seasons. Delories brings wisdom, compassion, and a deeply grounded perspective to conversations about family, identity, and healing. And I'm so grateful to have her in the garden with us today. Welcome, Delories.
oh, thank you. I am so excited to be here.
It's so good to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. I'm listening to all that you've done over time, and I'm like, it is amazing what you have accomplished. And I can only imagine the seeds that you have planted in communities and families over, just your career and still. So welcome. We are happy. I am happy to have you here. So get comfortable as
Yes.
we, settle into the garden and have this conversation that I think is a really important, conversation around tangle roots, family
Yes.
stuff, things that impact us before we even know that they're impacting us.
Yes.
So welcome and thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you.
When we
Okay.
talk about roots, we're really talking about origin stories, the ones we inherit before we ever get to choose. Roots determine how a plant absorbs nourishment and how it responds to stress. So I have a few questions, just keeping that, with that in mind, a few questions just around these tangle roots that I speak of. And I want to know, when you hear the phrase tangle roots, what does that bring up for you personally and professionally?
Oh, wow. You jumped right in there.
Listen,
Yes.
let's dive in it.
And so, so the word tangled, and I love words, and I love looking at the definition of words and then how they come together, right?
Mhm.
And so when I think of tangled, I just think of a lot of things all messed up, right? Initially, right? Because I'm thinking complexity, confusion, right? Things are just there, tangled up. And then, of course, when I think of roots, I think of foundation. And so, when you put those two together, now you're talking about something that's complex. Then I think about, but something that's not easily separated, right? Because if you're talking
Mm,
about roots in different places, just take it up together, they're not easily separated. And how do you do that, right? How do you do that? And so when I think about personally, my life,
mhm,
I was a teen mom, had a lot going on there, trying to raise children when I myself was still a child. I
mhm,
think about some of the early messages I heard and how that kind of propelled me in certain directions in life.
mm,
And then professionally, I'm in social work. So, with your background that, we have to look at the roots, right? What
yeah,
the origins of something. You mentioned that word origin, right? And so
yeah,
we have to look at that to kind of determine our present and how it impacts our present,
yeah,
and also how it can impact our future if we don't tend to it, right? And so that's what I think about, something that's complex, something that's not easily separated. And how
yeah.
do we begin that process?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I can imagine it's the same, personally as it is professionally. You have to kind of get in there and get in the weeds, as they would say. But I
Yeah.
think that when we think about untangling those roots, we have to realize or even be aware of the fact that they are tangled. It's
Yes.
like,
Yes. Right.
yes.
Yes. Because we survive. I think when we talk about our survival
Mhm,
skills, right? Like a lot of us survive. We've survived
mhm.
in the complexity of all of
Yes,
that, right? Like, and,
yes.
and really, in all honesty, that's what makes it so interesting because on one hand, it appears to be a mess, like it's all tangled,
Mhm,
but we use some of that mess, if you will, as a means to surviving, resilience, right?
mhm,
A coping mechanism, right? That got us to where a lot of us are today.
mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I think that is, you're right. Like it's when you go back and look at it, it is a challenge to kind of look at that and say, wow, did I even know that I was in a tangled mess during that
right.
time? You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's what I
no.
knew. You
Yes,
know.
exactly. We were just surviving.
Yep.
We were
Yep.
surviving.
One
Yeah.
foot in front of the other, and life
That's
is
it.
still happening.
Yeah.
There's still things, there are relationships that I'm trying to maintain.
Yeah.
There are, there's adulting, like you say, you were a parent really early. Things kind of, propel a little faster for us because I was a mom early too. And it's like, okay,
Wow.
these things are happening. How do I make time? How do I have the energy to even begin to say, oh, yeah, oh, there is this thing going on. Wait, this pattern
Yes.
keeps popping up. I keep doing the same thing again.
Over and
Maybe I
over.
need to look at that. And it can take years sometimes because we are
Indeed.
surviving. Yeah.
Yes, that right there. And for me, I was in denial about a lot of stuff. I tried really hard not to think about the entanglements, if you will, because in my own mind, I did not want to focus on that. But I think I just didn't want to focus on me. I felt
Mm,
like, I did this thing and I really saw it as something that was very harmful, if you
mhm,
will. Brought shame on the family, brought shame
mhm,
on, right, my children. I'm thinking, wow, they're gonna grow up and they have this single mom, daughter, all of the things. And so I think I kind of stayed in this perpetual state of denial. And so what I did was, okay, I'm just going to focus on trying to be the best me I can be. But I didn't have the right motive, right? Because I
mm.
was trying to do it to show people that I'm not going to be who y'all say I'm going to be. You
Yep.
know what I'm saying? Like that
Yep.
kind of thing. And so I focused on going to school and, getting the education, the degrees and all of this stuff, trying to be a good girl now because I had made all these poor choices.
You talking
Um,
to me, Miss Delories? You
Right.
talking
You,
to me?
you see what I'm saying? So, right. And so I was in denial. I didn't want to think about all of that. Right. I'm
Mm,
just going to move forward. So when you talk about tangled roots, I was messed up. And while on one hand, right, it helped me like all that entanglement, right.
yeah.
To kind of get to where but initially my motive was not what it needed to be, which can be unhealthy. Yeah.
Gotcha. It's so interesting that you bring up the good girl. I talked so much about that in my last episode,
Oh,
just
wow.
around, that feeling of needing to counter just the guilt and the shame and all of those things that I was feeling inside, and truly feeling that people, felt about me, even though these were things that I'm, feeling about myself in different
Right.
ways.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's one thing about this like good girl thing that comes up for me is that you spoke about it and you said it so eloquently about those complexities
Mm-hmm.
literally drive you. So it's there, and although the motives were not the best, that kind of in a because I just feel like everything's going to work out for us, regardless.
Yes.
I feel like just even though the motives were not there, just
Mm-hmm.
being able to propel you and to push you to a place where you need to be. So, maybe some people, whoever they are, their trajectory is like this. And ours might have been like this,
Right.
but we got to it. You know what I mean? Trying
Yes.
to be
Yes.
this good girl. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think that there is some avoidance
Yes.
in really looking at what's truly there. So I mean,
Yes.
that's why I said you speaking my language. When you said good girl, I'm like, oh, we have so much of the same story, and it's so interesting
Mm-hmm.
that it's nothing new under the sun.
That's it.
Completely different generations, and it's like we
Yes.
can learn so much from one another. So that just
That's
gave me
right.
the heebie-jeebies. Thank you. So in a good way, not in a bad,
Yes.
but in a good way.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it helps you to feel seen too.
Yes.
you know
Absolutely.
because if
Absolutely.
I had not known your story at that time,
Mm.
being a teen mom, seeing you being a social worker, doing all these things, I'm like, she is doing what she needs to do in life, and look at me, she's probably thinking I'm such and such. But to see that somebody has gone through the same experience, and just that level of representation, it just helps me to feel so comfortable and good and seen. And I think that that's really important, and it's so important in telling our stories.
And it really, and oh wow. So I got the chill bumps a little bit there because
We're
the
giving each
word
other
that
the heebie-jeebies, Diva
I know,
Delories.
right? Because check this, like you're talking, and I'm thinking about the word humanity.
Mm,
Wow, if as people, individuals all over can understand the word humanity, like I'm sharing something, you connect it, right? You say, oh, this is, and then I'm thinking, oh wow, right? Because I'm looking at you the same way, like, what can I, a seasoned, because I don't call myself old, woman, tell this young lady who seems like she got it going on, you know what I'm saying? And but there's this connection that I think as humans, because we all have stories and we all have challenges, right? And I think we can kind of connect on what brings us together as
yes.
human beings, right? Not necessarily things like gender roles or race or
Mhm.
ethnicity, right? Because I think those are things that tend to keep us separated, that divides
Mm,
us, right? But at the
mhm.
very basic level, I think our humanity
Yeah, yeah.
should some way bind us. But okay, anyway, but wow, thank you for saying what you just said. That really
No,
resonated with me.
absolutely same. And I think that, me and the producer T often talk about companion plants, and you think about what you can gain and get from, just being in proximity, just being in this moment. There's a little bit more healing that happened just in you telling me a part of your story. And that's how those
Yes.
companion plants work. They talk to each other, they feed each other,
Mm,
and they help each other to thrive.
yes.
And I
Yes.
just appreciate you sharing that. That just really blessed my whole
Mhm.
soul.
Mhm.
Um, so so we can move forward and not
Okay.
just, just be in here with each other. I do
Right.
have questions. So
Okay. Okay.
one of the questions that came up while you were talking was, in that, with the roots being tangled and everything that you are experiencing, and thinking about this parallel process that often happens with people who are in the service field, where they are working with families, they're in communities. We are often navigating some of the things that our families, are navigating at the time. There's this parallel process that's happening with us. So I just wanted to ask you about, did you feel like it was something that you had come to, on your own, just realizing and checking in on your own patterns? Or did you find that, I'm seeing some of these things in the work that I do that's very familiar with what I'm experiencing? Or did the families that you work with inform and make you more aware of some of the things you need to work on? Or how did that work for you?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. When I think about all of the things that informed my view now, I think about sitting in classrooms, and my background is social work, and so of course we're going over all these concepts, and I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be learning this to provide interventions for my clients eventually, right?
Yeah.
But I had to stop and think, oh, Dolores, you need that for you. You know what I'm saying? Like some of this stuff really helped me to see things through a different lens. Because
Mm,
before, now keep in mind, I said earlier, I was in a state of denial. So I never really want to focus on my poor choices, the state that we were in as a family, all of the things, right? I just want to focus on the good stuff so that I
Yes.
could be the good girl and look
Mhm.
good, right? To make up for what I had done wrong,
Yeah,
right?
like
And
that's in the
so,
past. We don't need to talk about those things. I'm here
right,
now.
exactly. See, just always, right? And
Yeah.
so I just wanted people when they saw me to say, "Oh, she's doing this." Oh, and then I was a people
Yeah.
pleaser and I went through all this stuff, right? But what helped me was sitting in the classrooms, learning this stuff and saying, "Oh, okay, right." And of course, and I
Mhm.
know you know this, right? Like, because you're a therapist, and so you sit there and you're supposed to be learning these concepts to better help others when you yourself are being helped. And I was helped. In addition, of course, when I had children, I always tell people the version of me that you see today is because of the growth that took place with my children. Like I've learned so much from them. And so I tell parents all the time, sometimes I'm the mama and no, we better stop and we better listen, right? Because they
Yeah.
can really, really help you grow in some ways. And I tell you, they challenged me probably more than any textbook ever will. And
Mm,
so that also helped, my children, my education,
mhm,
and indeed the families that I work with as well. And I'll just share this right quick, just a quick example. I remember saying, oh, when I, get into this field, I'm going to help teen moms, right? Because here I am thinking I was a teen mom, so I can really help them, right? Got in it, did an internship, started working with teen moms, and this is what I found out. And that's why in any space that I go in, I'm always gleaning from others, even as an instructor at the university. I'm in a class of 28 to 40 people, and people, oh, you're teaching us. No, 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 no. Y'all are teaching me. I'm gleaning from you all, right? But I
mhm,
remember the teen moms I work with, I had to leave one day and say, here I am thinking I'm getting ready to help them, show them a better way, tell them about resources. And this is what I had to realize that even though we had the same presenting problem
mhm.
or challenge, right? That we were both teen moms. The difference was, and this is, I know you know this, right? Because we have to assess the situation and we assess for things like coping mechanisms and all of that. A lot of them did not have the support that I had. So
That
I
is
still couldn't say, oh, I understand what you're going through,
mhm,
right? Because even though we had a similar challenge,
mhm.
I had a lot of support. Like my
Yeah.
family was very supportive. They were on their own, some of them. They didn't have family support. And so again, I guess I say this to say that when we think about, tangled roots, like the origin, like
Mhm,
what was their story? What was the origin of how did they get to where they were? I couldn't sit up and just kind of rest on my laurels, if you will, and say, oh, I understand and I can really no, I had to listen to them and I had to hear their story. Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, which was
Absolutely.
different.
I went into and I said, I want to work with teen moms.
Mm,
That's what I said that I
wow.
wanted to do. And I think that I talked a little bit about outsourcing healing. I think a part of me felt like this would be a redemptive thing to do. Like I need to go back and get that part of
Yes.
me. I'm not trying to work on my own stuff, but I'm figuring if I can help them with theirs, then
Come
I would
on.
be
Yes.
Miss
Yes.
Dolores.
Yes. That right
So
there.
I think that in, humanity. And I'm so
Mm.
glad that you brought that up in the sharing of stories and experience. You see the similarities, but you also see the differences. And I think
Yes.
in those differences, that's when you begin to empathy really comes in, awareness really comes in, and those things that can help you to like, okay, we're the same, but there are some things that are very different. I have a set of resources
Come
that this
right
young
there.
lady does not have that makes us
Exactly.
feel very different. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and it's so interesting. Both of us were trying to
Yes.
fix ourselves through other people in certain ways.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that story.
Mm.
Another question that I wanted to ask you was, how do family systems shape your identity before you even have the language for it? How do you feel
Mm.
like family systems could kind of shape that identity for you?
So when we talk about families, right, we're talking about kind of like these intergenerational patterns. We're talking about things that are part of the family's culture. I think about stuff like our work ethic. Um,
Mm,
and when you think about, and I'm sure you can resonate with this, right? We were taught to work twice as hard and, all of these things, right? So if we're taught to work twice as hard, we grow up with that and we go in these workspaces. Now, that has benefited us in some way, right?
mhm,
Because,
mhm,
especially when I think about Black women, we're doing some amazing things, right? But I also think about what that means in terms of the language that we use, right?
mhm,
So if you're saying work twice as hard, it, what do I glean from that? That I'm not like what I do is not enough. Like me
mhm,
just being authentically me and working. why do you have to put that twice as hard on there,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just think that we tend to then start processing that kind of stuff. If I'm sitting up praising one of my children for being easy, like, right, oh, you're just so easy, oh, this child right here is so good and so easy, and so then that child grows up thinking that they need to keep the peace, right? Like,
Mm,
okay, right, I'm the one who needs to keep the peace, because they
yep.
want to continue to hear that. But what are they neglecting within themselves, right? Because what if they don't feel like keeping the peace in that situation? What if that peace then does something to their healing, or where they are, or they're growing, or they're evolved, how they're evolving? And so I think that when we talk about identity before language, if I give you a label before I'm even able to, before you're able to comprehend that, I think there can be a lot of mixed messages in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think about the harm that can be done. Like, again, a people pleaser. Like, I grew up in a very religious family too. And so it's
Same.
all about serving others and pleasing God, and, pleasing, and so in my mind, I'm thinking that's what I'm supposed to do, right? Please
Mm,
others. But at whose expense? Because
yep.
what if pleasing others mean leaving myself out of the equation, which
Yeah.
so many of us often do. And then we find ourselves at however old, 40, 50, 60, not knowing who we are, and
Yeah.
what we, so anyway, so I think it's things like that when we talk about identity before language.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is all so good. Like,
mm,
this is so good.
mm, mm,
You know, I just think that I wish that people talked about these things more, and hopefully, this episode would just start conversations,
mm,
within families or within, friend groups, and so people can actually talk about these things that, we don't often, just have conversations about. I think because we're in the field that it comes up,
yes.
but I'm also thinking about, the idea of how things are passed down and we don't really question it. You
Yes.
know, there
Yes.
is this, anecdote that I often share with my clients. I don't even know where I heard this from,
Mm,
but there was a young lady who wanted to make a pot. I believe it was a pot of greens, either
mm,
greens or beans. And
mm-hmm,
she asked her mom,
mm-hmm,
why do we cut the bottom of the meat off before we put it in? She was like, but why do we cut this piece off before we put it in the, let's just say, greens?
mm,
She was like, I don't know. Let me ask your grandmother. So her mother asked her mother, like,
mm.
Mom, why do we
Right.
put this? She was like, I'm not sure. Let me ask your
Yes.
grandmother. So she asked her mom,
Mm,
and she was like, now, and this, I think it was 4 generations, and they went
uh,
back. And finally, Meemaw said, oh, I didn't have a pot big enough.
mm,
So I cut it. And literally, and I use that as an example of how scarcity is passed down, and we don't even
yes.
realize that we're doing it. But just thinking about that being an example of how roots can really, pass down. I have a different set of resources that is no longer my situation, but because
Mm.
something that happened
That's
4 generations that
that's
preceded
right.
worked for them. She
Yes.
had to cut it because she didn't have a pot big enough.
Period.
Great granddaughter has a pot that's big enough, and she's still functioning as if she
That's right.
doesn't have the resources to
Mm,
use the whole thing. And
mm.
nobody asked why, nobody questioned it. You
That's
just
it.
kind of go along, just kind of go along to, because that's how it's always been done.
That's it. And you said you go along, and I'll just add to get along,
Mhm.
right? Because the other thing is sometimes we were taught, when we think about the word respect, not to question stuff, right? And so things get passed down without examination, really,
Mm,
right? We don't examine stuff, we don't critically ask the questions. And so when I said earlier, my children have taught me a lot, they started asking the questions. I was a PK's kid, right? And so I grew up in a very religious household, and there were a lot of things that were taught, like, and during that time, women preachers were unheard of. And I
mm,
would be sitting back there thinking, why can't women preach? Like, I had all these questions, but then there was this rule of thumb within the spiritual circle around not questioning God, and that was a sign of disrespect, and da 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 da, right? God is all knowing, almighty. And so over time I started saying, if why can't we go to we say that God is a creator and all that, why can't we question the very person or entity that we say it anyway, I started questioning some stuff, and I remember my mom saying, "Okay, Dolores," because I was kind of like the one in the family. I want to say then I said bad apple. I wouldn't say the word bad now, but I was then it was called the bad apple of the family. At least that's how I saw myself. And so
Mm,
my mom would say, "Dolores, okay, wait," because I would just question. I would ask my dad, "Why not? Why not?" Da 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 da. And so to your point, we do just pass things down without examining them, right? We just, and I always say the word regurgitate. We just regurgitate. We go around regurgitating, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
don't have a clue sometimes. And I get it, right? We do what we've seen, like what
mhm.
we've always done. And I think in our work, and I know you do this too, right? We really try to have people to examine that. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
So that's one of the questions I'm always asking. They'll say, I do this and this is how I do this. And then and I'll say, okay, so where does that come from? And
Mhm,
sometimes they have to stop. Well, I think okay, so you think it came from your grandmother. So tell me what was her reason for that? Just trying to
mhm.
delve deeper and help them to critically assess and think about the situation and why they're still doing the things the way they, and not to say that it's a bad thing, right?
Right.
But I want them to understand or examine where it's coming from. And if it, you said it, or if it serves them
Mhm,
today,
mhm.
right? Because you said sometimes we have the resources and everything. We don't have to keep doing the things that
Right.
was done 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a
Yeah.
very good point. Absolutely. Yeah.
And just hearing you, it sounded like, you were the outspoken, child, and you kind of challenged some things and asking questions, that curiosity that you
Hmm.
had. Like, I don't want to just go along. I need to know, like,
Right.
what is that? Why is that? Just really having
Hmm.
those questions. But I think in asking questions and how it can be perceived, it can lend to some folks being quiet and not
Yes.
saying things. So the next
Yes.
question that I do have, is how do we honor the good in our families,
Mm.
while still naming some of the harm?
Yes.
Because that
Um,
can be hard and
yes.
generationally,
Yes.
like what you do that hurt my feelings. These were things that children didn't typically say to their
Yes.
parents, around
Absolutely.
how they were made to feel or whatever the case may be. So I'm really, wanting to know what your thoughts are about, how do we honor the good while,
Right.
naming some of the harm.
You know what? And that's such a good question. I did this little thing on social media, and I said that did a couple of little segments of it, and I said that I'm an and person, AND. I think that we live in a society where people think you have to be either or. I
Mm,
also think religiously, again, right? I have to bring that up again because I, grew up in a very religious family. The Bible talks about not being lukewarm, either you this or that, right? But I've come to the conclusion late in life, in my seasoned era, that I'm an and person. I feel like two things can simultaneously exist at one time. And so when you say, how can you honor and yet still speak your truth? Because you can do both.
yeah.
And I don't know about you, but when I'm working with families, one of the things we talk about is the fact that you can do both, because they really think that if I speak up, if I say that'll be disrespectful, I'll be perceived this way, da 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 da. And I'm saying, okay, and so what you're saying is that you don't want to do that. You don't want to bring it, cause any harm in your mind. But so you're willing, right, to neglect self, to not speak your truth, to not be authentically who you are and show up the way that's going to make sure you're protected and at peace and etc. And so we just kind of talk about, so can it be done? Absolutely. But I think the first thing is you have to reconcile with what that means for you, because if you don't, it can't come off as however you think it might, right? So you have to start thinking about, what is it that I really want out of this situation, because sometimes people don't know. I know I did for a long time, right? So even when I say I need to speak up, what was I expecting in terms of an outcome?
Ooh,
Do you know what I'm saying?
so
Right. So
good,
you have to
Mr.
take it
Lewis.
further in your own mind before you
Mhm,
can then, be this person who, yeah, I'm a come, I'm gonna speak up, I'm gonna do. No, you have to think about what that means. So I would say the first step is to really think about, what is it that you desire out of this situation? What is it that you really want to happen? Even if you speak up, even if you speak your truth, what are you looking at in terms of a potential outcome? And what if you don't get the outcome that you expect?
ooh, ooh,
Do you know what I'm saying?
yep.
Right. So I think all of those things should be addressed, so that first within so that's a conversation with yourself. People say, oh, you
Yeah,
should talk to yourself. And then others say, well, you can talk to yourself, but just don't answer yourself. I say, talk to yourself and answer yourself, right?
me
Because
too.
we know that's the right. That that's the stuff, right? Being self-aware, introspective, having those conversations with yourself,
Mhm,
trying to find. So anyway, so I would say that yes, I'm an and person. So yes, I think it can happen. I do think the first step is to really look inwardly and
mhm,
and think about it and process it inwardly, and then after that, of course, there are steps. You got to think about what your boundaries are. You got to think, because boundaries are for us, right? The person who's setting the boundaries, it's for
Yeah.
you, right? So you think about what those are. Um, and then the hard part, and all of that's hard too now. But then it's kind of like, take that breath and jump in. But I think the difference is when you get to the place. My daughter Tanisha taught me this. She did it in a training, and I stole. I mean, not stole. Did I say stole? No,
You
I didn't mean that. I borrowed. Um, and so I took credit. But in some of her training, she talked about the importance of, and she did some DEI training, right? Diversity,
Mhm.
equity, and inclusion training. And that's just hard work, right? When we're trying to really, deal with those issues. But she talked
Yeah.
about you have to go into it not expecting um, the outcome that you might want, right?
Mhm.
And so that kind of softens the blow a little bit for you if you go in
Yeah.
not expecting, because you know what
Yeah.
happens when we expect it and don't get it, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think those are some steps that I would think about.
Absolutely. I think that, just thinking about that, those steps and working through even having to navigate that is a good, space
Mhm.
to insert the lady. Go and
Wh-
talk to a counselor. Go
Yeah,
and talk to somebody to help you navigate through these things, because
yes.
yes, I'm talking to myself and I'm answering myself. And I think that that's good. I think we should be introspective. I think we should have conversations with ourselves, and, explore and be curious about what made me think that way and, things like that. But also being able to sit
Yes.
in a room where you feel safe and have someone
Yes.
you can bounce these things off. So we can talk through or role play what it looks like to
Yes.
bring up this thing
Absolutely.
that I feel like I really need to talk about, but I'm not sure how, when, or what may happen as a result of it. So being
Yes.
able to have someone to hold
Mm.
space for you in that way can be very helpful when you're talking about beginning to untangle these roots, because I have to untangle some things in myself before I can begin to truly
Yes.
get deeper and pull things apart, and I
Mm.
might meet some resistance, so I'm going to
Yes.
need some support
Yes.
as I'm navigating, because once you open it up, you can't really stuff
Yeah.
it back in. So
Right there. Right there. Now that's
it's
real
like an
talk.
ongoing process that of
It
you trying
is.
to, and
That's
everybody don't like you talking about them hurting them,
yes.
and it would it, because they didn't mean it that way or whatever. Or like we talked about, oh, that's in the past. I'm moving
Right.
forward. I
That's
don't
right.
want to address those things. I'm too busy being a good girl to worry about the things that I did before, type of thing.
That's it.
Sometimes people are there. So just because you've gotten to a place where you're
Yes.
ready to
Yes.
untangle some things
Mm.
doesn't mean that everybody is.
Everybody right there.
So
Yes. Oh,
to
that's
have somebody,
perfect.
yeah,
Oh,
to
that
have
was that
somebody
was a good
support you.
insertion right there to
Mhm.
say that, right? Because I do think and that's another whole topic, right? Because why is it that some people are hesitant, to bring somebody in, right? To go see a therapist, to go see somebody who can be more objective, and that, so it kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, though, too, right? Because think about how many families, our business is our business, like these messages, right? And so you don't bring people into our business, and so I think that's another whole layer that
Oh, it
you
is. It
you have to
is.
deal with. But it's so, oh my goodness, thank you for inserting that, because that is, we need help sometimes untangling. We used to call it in social work, we talked about the onion, and somebody will come in and present this round onion, right, with all of this stuff on the outside, and our role was to help pull back the
The
layers,
layers.
right? And we need help, and people need help pulling back the layers, right? Because what happens when you're opening up an onion, right? You tear up, and not
Yeah.
necessarily because but because of what's in the onion, and then now you can't see
Mhm.
how, and so you need somebody. So wow, yeah, that
For
was a
sure.
good, that was good right there. You did that one right there. That's
Thank
right. Bring it
you.
back to that.
Thank you, Miss Delories.
That was good. That was good. Yes.
But it's true. And I do think that, along with just the challenges that you might get,
Mhm.
from people not being ready, there is a religious aspect of that. We don't
Yes.
need these outsiders to come in. Everything is in the body. Everything
Yes.
is in the body. Whatever you need, you take it
Come
to the
on.
altar. It's
Mm-mm.
here.
Mm.
You shouldn't have to. So there are some messages and messaging around, what happens in the house stays in the house. What is your faith looking like if you feel like you can't take whatever it is,
Come on. Right
to
there.
God in prayer, to the altar, to, the elders in the church and things like
Yeah.
that. Like you
Yes.
messing up protocol,
Right. Absolutely. Real
there's a
talk.
protocol to this thing,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
you kind of hold on to it and don't necessarily know what to do with it. But I will say, when it comes to these tangle roots, we could talk all day. First of all, let me just
Yes, right.
this is so good.
That's
And
right.
I may have to talk to the producer about doing two parts because I don't want to rush through this and I don't want
Right.
it to, but anyway, but
Mm,
I think that, just understanding that there is so much, more to
mm,
us. We're thinking about, the roots while also having to consider the fruit
mm,
because a big part
mm,
of what I'm doing, a big part around my purpose is the fruit that I'm bearing.
mm.
So it's like
Yeah.
the importance of I have to look back. I have to ruffle some feathers. I may have to say things that might, hurt or whatever the case may be. But it's like I am willing to kind of endure, to take, or to kind of navigate through that because this fruit is so important to me.
Come on
My
now, right
children,
there.
my grandchildren, this next
Yes.
generation of people that we have coming up. Like I get it,
Mm.
I'm gonna let y'all finish, but we need to really consider who's up next.
That come
You,
on, that right there.
you know
That
what I'm
right
saying?
there. Absolutely.
So that has been something that as I'm getting older, that's helped me to like kind of deal with these tangle roots and
Mm.
maybe stepping on a few toes. People always say, you so honest. And I'm like, in
Mm.
a bad way. They're like, no, you will tell the truth. And sometimes we don't even know we getting chastised.
Right.
Chastised.
That
You
yeah.
just kind of come through like, oh, did she cut me? No, I'm not
Mm.
cutting anybody. But at the
Right.
same time, I think sometimes things need to be said because my purpose and what I've been placed on this earth to do has far more importance to me than, somebody's, toes being stepped on and them feeling a certain type of way. I'm not saying
That's
it's not
it.
uncomfortable, but I
Right.
do think that's what helps to kind of drive. So, what is it like, being the person for you, the person to kind of ruffle the feathers, the person that kind of says that was not okay. I
Mm.
know that you did that because that was you were doing the best that you can, but actually that wasn't as helpful as
Yes.
you thought that it was. What would be
Mm.
more helpful?
Mm.
Would have been more helpful is this type of thing. Being that person to do that, how do you then,
Mm.
take care of yourself, as you are kind of, saying and doing things that may be difficult for you and may disrupt some of the relationships that you have within
Mm.
family systems.
Wow, that's good. That's a really good question. And then as you were talking, let me tell you what I thought about.
Mhm.
This word silence, right? Because really, that's what we both could choose not to bring up anything and say anything, right? We
Mhm.
could just appease everybody who comes, in our presence, right? We could, right? And remember, I said I was a people pleaser at one point,
Mhm.
right? So it
Mhm.
was for me about pleasing. I wanted people to see me in a certain light.
Yeah.
And several things happened to help me to see that differently. I had a mentor, Dr. Washington, when I first started teaching. I'm thinking, if everybody just gets a nice grade and then I'll get good teacher evaluations and then she'll want to keep me on and, all of the things, they'll be satisfied. I'll be sad, but I wasn't
Mhm.
satisfied. Right. And anyway, so I had to have a conversation with her. But let me just say this: silence protects the system, but not the people. Think about that, right? Like, so we could be silent and protect whatever the system is, whether it's a family system, an educational system, right? A political system, right? But not the people in it because we're not being honest and straightforward. And so one of the things Dr. Washington challenged me with was, so why are you teaching? What is the goal here? What is it that you want for the students, for the people? Not the university, not the system.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? And so
Yes.
I have to focus on that when I'm struggling with whether or not to talk about something that's uncomfortable, and not even necessarily for me, it could be, but
Mhm.
more so for the other person.
Mhm.
And I'm learning, Miss Therapist here, Aiysha, that the uncomfortable place is where we grow. It's
Mhm.
in that uncomfortable space. When you think about your life, think about all the times that you've grown the most.
Mm.
It's usually in that uncomfortable place in your life, whatever you were going through. We both just talked about as having our children early. It was in that place that was uncomfortable for us, right? To hear people talk about us, to hear people, you're never going to be anything. You're going to be just like da da da, you da da da. But we made some decisions in that place that propelled us in a direction.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh
And
yeah.
so I guess I'm saying all this to say that, how do I take care of me in all of this? I'm learning to focus on what is it that you really want to see? What is it that you desire for the people, the individuals, for humanity? and not just the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, my children helped me with that as well. I remember when I took all of them out to eat. I have four children at different times, and I had two questions, and I wanted feedback as a parent, right? And this again, I was in social work and all this stuff, right? So I'm thinking, okay, maybe I need to do this. I took them out individually, and I said, okay, so tell me one of the things that you think is going on in our household that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a parent, something that's good, but then tell me something that you wish I would do differently. Now that was such a challenge for me because remember now I said that I was always in denial about stuff. I really didn't want to deal with. I just want to move forward and make things better, right? Not deal with
Yeah.
the roots. And they told me some stuff, and I'm like, oh. And one of the things I remember them saying is that I didn't tell them I loved them enough, nor did I hug them enough. Now,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that again, the roots of stuff, I had a very supportive family, very supportive. When I tell you, very supportive, but they were not even my parents. Like when I would go home and visit, you could see in their eyes how excited they were to see me and the children. But there was
Yeah.
not a lot of hugging and all of
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There even a lot of I love yous, not a lot of this, but now I saw it in their actions. So what happens? We're talking about this intergenerational patterns. I
Yes.
passed that down. I didn't say I love you a lot, but I was trying to show it in my actions, not
Mm-hmm.
wanting to stay on the system, wanting them to have the best, wanting to make sure
Mm-hmm.
I attended all of their stuff, like all of this stuff. And I'm thinking, I'm doing right. But no, this is what they said. Now, at first I got very defensive, like, and I still do about things sometimes, right? Because you want to be again. It goes back to I know where it comes from.
Uh-huh.
Me wanting to be seen in a certain light because of all the poor choices I made.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, but it was in that like that I had to think, wow, this is what they're saying. Like I asked them the question, you know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? And this is
Yeah.
what they're telling me. And so I guess I'm saying all this to say that we really do have to deal with our why. And I'll keep going back to motives. And so when you ask that question, I'm thinking, why? What is it that I want people to glean from whatever experience or whatever interaction that I am in with folk? And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know about you, but I want people to be honest and authentic with me. And I
Yes.
want to create a safe space where people can do that. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I need to be that way because if at the end of the day, it really is about growth
Yeah.
and love
Yeah.
and wanting people and empowering people versus enabling people, then we
Yeah.
have to make some decisions about our presence in somebody's life at any given
Yeah.
point in time.
Absolutely. Ah, that's so good. Like I'm
Mm,
just thinking about how even though there may not at that time been, as many hugs that they would like or as much I love you as they, would like, there was a space created for them to be honest with you
mm,
about what it was that they needed and feeling safe enough. So
mm.
there are things that are happening. Like,
Yes,
there are
right,
things that are
right.
happening because if they didn't no, they be like, no, everything's fine. If they don't feel you're the best mommy ever. Like, but they're like, mm-mm. So, we need this, you do this,
Right.
okay, but then you can do this.
Yes.
But it speaks to the
Mm,
environment that was
mm,
created as a
mm.
mom,
Right.
that I think too was the beginning of an untangling because I'm doing something different.
Different. Right
I
there.
am doing something different. I am
Mm-hmm.
shifting, and sometimes we can do that without going back and saying,
Mm,
hey, you didn't do this and never did it. Sometimes we don't have to do that. I do
mm.
think that it's important that, like you said, we check like
Right.
what our motives are and the
Mm-hmm.
intended outcomes. Because yes, this might be something that I feel like needs to change, but it
Yeah.
might not necessarily be anything that I might need to go back and say. So really assessing that,
Yes.
and understanding like what's the reason, what are my
Yes.
motives behind, that.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we can begin to untangle roots
Mm.
without, kind of going and doing all the things, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Sometimes we don't
Absolutely.
have to do, so figuring out what that is and it's still being effective when we think
Yes.
about our fruit,
Mm.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this conversation is just so rich, and I'm
Yes.
really, enjoying
Mm-hmm.
just how much just you can feel the energy exchange and
Mm-hmm.
how important these things are, and not just for us moving forward and things like that, but for us as the good girls who
Yes.
are recognizing that there were some things that we needed to untangle. There were some things that we need to clear out. And this truly clear space. It's not me running from anything. I can look
Mm.
in my, rear view and say, oh, I see that. I see what's going on and not try to avoid it. I can look back and continue to look forward. You know how they say, check your
Yes.
mirrors. You need to check
Yes.
your mirrors while still keeping your eyes on. I can check
Oh,
my mirrors and be okay.
okay. Wait. See, this is why this is so crazy because as you were talking, and you might not believe me, but I was thinking about a presentation that I did where we talked about the mirrors. the rear view mirror, the side mirrors, and then the mirror. Oh my goodness. And the fact that you just said that. Okay, go ahead. I want to holler, but I'm gonna be
Here,
professional. Go ahead.
here.
Mm-hmm.
You can holler.
Because I do, some people don't think you need to look back, but I do think you need to at least look back to see what's coming, because you know this, you'll repeat the same thing if you don't at least reflect on why. And then the side mirrors just kind of help us stay in the present, right? Like to
Mhm.
see what's around us. And then the mirror, when you're looking ahead, that, oh my goodness, that's the future, right? Like, because you're trying to
Yeah,
prepare for it. But anyway, go ahead. That's awesome. Okay.
it is. See, we on the
Woo.
same page.
Okay.
But for the next question, I did want to
Okay.
ask, how do you think cultural expectations complicate the conversation about boundaries? Because,
Mm.
like, when we talk about some tangled things that happen, sometimes we bring up these things and what's expected, and we talked about outcomes and expectation, is changed
Mm.
behavior.
Yes.
And even if it's not changed behavior on their end, then some behaviors on my end are going to have to change. I might have to
Mm.
leave early or not come, or what, there's certain things that may need to happen. But I do, want to ask you about, like, how cultural expectations, may complicate this conversation around boundaries.
Oh yes, that's a good one. When we think about culture and let's say faith, right? It can complicate this stuff, right? Because then we start thinking about how that's more important than integrity and
Mm,
honesty and all the things that we just talked about, right? Because culture and faith can, look at endurance and kind of prioritize that over honesty. And an
mhm,
example, just a quick example would be, that's just family. So you just need to forgive family, right? And so we're asked to forgive family when we've not talked about accountability.
ooh,
Do you know what I'm saying? Right? Because of culture and faith. Honor your parents, regardless of what your parents have done, regardless of, perhaps them, providing a toxic situation or an unhealthy situation. I tell
mm,
my children all the time that I was married to their father, for a short period of time, but it was not a healthy relationship. Now, there was no abuse or anything like that. We were just two young people getting married, thinking we were doing the right thing because we had
mm,
children, right? And
mhm,
so it was unhealthy. It was not, a relationship, a loving,
mhm,
caring relationship, with all the, and so I could just sit up and say, but that's your father and I'm your mother. So you just said, no, like you have to talk about those things. So I think
mhm,
we have to be careful with culture, faith, tradition, all of those
mhm,
things, right? When we allow that to take precedence over important character or characteristics, right? Like,
yeah,
integrity and honesty
mhm,
and accountability and responsibility and that kind of
yeah.
thing. So
And the
yeah.
potential harm
Yeah,
that
well,
it could be
exactly.
doing to
Exactly.
you. I'm
Yes.
here, I have my kids around, they looking around like, why is that person talking to this person that way? And
Yes. Yes.
this auntie says negative things about the way I look or my
Mm.
hair. And, like, but that's always been the auntie that's been out of pocket.
Yeah.
That's just how she is. Not with my
Exactly.
kid.
Look right there. It stops
Boundary.
here. It stops here.
Boundary. But some
Yes.
of those cultural expectations be like, that's family, that's just how
That,
she is, we
that's
don't
how
pay no attention to her, da, 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 while continuing to harm.
exactly.
So I'm glad that kind of brought that
Mm.
up in that way, because that thing about that's you only get one mother, you only that's family.
Right.
No, you want me to forgive, but this person hasn't done anything repentive. This person
Exactly.
hasn't
They
done
haven't
anything.
acknowledged it. They
Yeah.
have not. The uncle who, don't let your little girl go around him now, but you still
Mm-hmm.
allow him in the house,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want him to acknowledge, well, we don't want everybody to, no, okay, but now we have some
Mm-hmm.
abuse going on in the family. Like, anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and the message,
The
right, that
message.
sends. And so I think we forget the message that sends
Yes.
to children who are trying to process all of this.
Yes.
Anyway, so yes, that's, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so important.
With that, and
Okay.
it kind of leads me to, when do you kind of know it's time to prune some people? I might need to, cut you
Yes.
cut you
Uh-huh.
loose. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It might be time, because yes, that is family, but like you said, there can be some, family members, there can be some behaviors that could be detrimental, not just to you, but to other family members, like your children, nieces, nephews, whomever.
Yes.
Like, when do you, is there something that kind of, or examples of things that you can think of, that when you think about pruning, what comes up when it comes to that boundary for you?
Yeah, and I think actually something you said a few minutes ago, like that's the auntie who always talking about the kids, or she always says something about your child. And you think, oh no, not with my child, right? I think for people, it'll be different things, right? I
Mhm.
think we all have probably some, we use the word triggers or something that makes us say, oh wait a minute, right?
Mhm.
So I think it's time to prune when that connection becomes betrayal, right? Or
Mhm.
require self betrayal. So I'm sitting up, um, I'm betraying myself just because it's family, because it's that, or I'm betraying my children because
Mm.
look, that's who she is. She gonna talk about them, da 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 da. Is that fair to them? Right. So I think when it gets to that point where somebody else's behavior impacts you in a way um, that feels like betrayal to
Mhm.
you or to the ones you love, your family, your children, your whatever, right? And then I think it's time to have a conversation with yourself and or seek a
Mhm.
therapist, right? To help you to figure out what is this and what are the steps I need to take to put these boundaries in place. Because perhaps you say, I don't want there to be a total disconnect, but what I know can't happen is this stuff that's been happening all the time. Or
Yeah.
so I think we feel it.
Yeah, I think that that's a
Yeah.
good, barometer to kind of say, okay, this doesn't feel good.
Feel
Checking
right.
in with the nervous
Yes.
system. you
Yes.
know,
Right there.
because your body will let you know. You will let you know when
Yes.
something doesn't feel right and when this goes against everything that I know.
Yes.
Is safe, is good, is what I mean.
Yes.
Like so, I think that being able to have something to say, like, okay, am I betraying myself in this?
Yes. Yes.
What
Yes.
does it look like for me to show up and take care of family, but also show up and
Yes.
take care of myself? Because I might not
Exactly.
even have children.
Right.
But what I see you
Absolutely.
doing with other people, or it might really be bothering me and messing with my own integrity around. Like, I can't just sit here and let this
Exactly.
happen when I know how harmful it was for me, and I can see how
That's it.
uncomfortable it is for other people. So you might feel compelled to say something.
That's right.
And but I do think that that is a beginning stage of recognizing when it's
Yes.
and when not to prune, or
Exactly.
how to prune.
Or how to. Yes.
What does intergenerational healing look like for you in practice?
That's a really good question. Because if I can just in my mind think about what that looks like, it looks like interrupting patterns, right?
Mm,
How can I stop these patterns? At least interrupt them where, maybe we can all kind of sit up and think about what this means. And so when we talk about intergenerational healing, that looks like an example would be I was mentioning earlier. As a parent, I was a teen mom. I made some poor choices, and I don't sit up and say I made mistakes, right? I know that sometimes as humans we make mistakes, but that word is totally different from poor choices. And I
mm,
started using poor choices because of the accountability. I think sometimes when we say a mistake, oops, oops, it happened, da 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 da, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
sometimes we don't want to take full responsibility for a mistake like we would. I made some poor choices. And as a result of those poor choices that I made, I had to figure out what am I going to do about those. So I can't just say, well, I'm the mama where, well, I did the best that I could. No, one of the big things that I did was to apologize. So I had to
mm,
acknowledge my stuff, which is very challenging to do,
yeah,
right? And then I had to say, okay, what next? All right. Because I think
mhm,
sometimes we get stuck on, okay, I'm now aware of this, but now what's the next step after that, right? and,
okay,
and for me it was action. You have to take some action that now that you're aware. So if I say I have a problem with alcoholism or drugs or whatever,
mhm,
now what? And so I had to say, you know what, now what? And I had to apologize to my children for a
mm,
lot of my poor choices and the impact that had on our family as a system, right?
yeah,
And the impact it had on them individually as
yeah,
well, right? And so
mhm,
anyway, so I would say if we're thinking about intergenerational healing, it's about interrupting some of those patterns that we're just so used to, that we grew up with, that we, like you were mentioning about the pan that was used
yeah.
and we were
The
doing the
hand
same thing,
bone, like, why
right?
are we cutting this?
Right. Like just stopping and saying, you know what? I no longer have to do this because I have the
Mhm,
resources to do
mhm,
this in a manner
mhm. The
that
resources have changed. Things are different, right?
exactly. And
So,
so you can choose a different response. And that's what I
right,
think we need to do. We need to choose some different responses to get the outcomes that we want, we desire,
yes.
and that what's best for us and our families or whatever, right?
So another thing that comes up, and that's really good. Another thing that comes up around intergenerational healing for me is learning. A part of the healing is kind of learning some of what your elders may have experienced, and it
Hmm.
helps with the empathy, and it helps you to kind of depersonalize some of the things. Doesn't make it okay or anything like that, but it may feel differently, or I might absorb it differently, or be able to kind of release it differently if I'm not so personalized in it, because I'm able to see a little bit around what may have been your experience, and I may be able to empathize with that
Okay.
a little bit better. So if I understand that, like you were saying around the hugs, I I probably needed some hugs, but I didn't get those either. But that's probably
Mm.
because my parents didn't get them, and probably because they didn't get them,
Therapy.
and
Absolutely.
thinking about what they experienced. So it can kind of help to depersonalize some of that. And that can be, I think, along with, some of the other things that we discussed, helpful in the
Yes.
healing process, being able to depersonalize some of that.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for
Indeed.
sharing that. I have one question just around this conversation, because of
Mhm.
course we have our two questions at the end, but
All right.
just to kind of round out our conversation, just around these tangle roots, that has been so
Mm.
good.
Yes, I love this.
Um, how can elders, spiritual counselors, and community, when you think about them, because everybody don't want to talk to the
That's
lady,
right. That's right.
support some of this,
That's right.
healing work, or, some of this work around, untangling roots. And sometimes we are talking to the lady, but these other,
Yes.
folks and, resources can, you know, create some kind of community of support for you. So it's not just one thing that you're relying on. So just how do you see, elders, spiritual counselors, and community playing their part in this process?
I would say that it's so important, number one, for us to have these conversations with our elders, with pastors, with leaders, with like what you're doing right now, just having a conversation, right? Creating a safe space for people to be able to talk about these things. It's something that I think we need more of. And especially when we talk about people who people look up to and think are already there, if you will. Like, these are the leaders, these are the counselors, these are the elders. They have the wisdom, they have the knowledge, they already have this stuff, right? When in fact, as we've talked about today, sometimes people assume that we have these things because of our titles and positions and et cetera, when we have some tangled roots that, sometimes we have not dealt with. Because I don't ever think it stops, right? I don't ever think we get to a point where, oh, we've arrived. I told you earlier, I was an and person. I'm also an ing person. And so I think that ing, just those three letters mean in process of. And I think we're always in process of growing, evolving, learning, unlearning, all of the things. So number one, I would say, creating a space for even the people like our elders, leaders, and et cetera, who we think might already be there. But the other thing is, I think we, elders, leaders, counselors, therapists, and et cetera, that we have to model accountability.
Ooh,
We
yes.
have to model, what does that look like? Faith leaders uh, over the pulpit maybe saying therapy is okay, right? Prayer, faith, and therapy. You can use all the tools, right? To help. And so I think that we first have to take some and be responsible, take some accountability, and especially for a lot of things that are happening, even when we think about faith leaders and churches, pastors, et cetera, how many times you turn around and these things are happening right within the churches and all this stuff, acknowledging that stuff, taking responsibility, being accountable, and saying, now this is what we need to do to ensure that this stuff does not happen. So I just think we just have to encourage this kind of honest dialogue as opposed to the silence I talked about. So instead of trying to protect the system, the church,
Mm,
let's really start really thinking about the people that are part of the systems. And so that's one of the things I think.
very good.
Mhm,
I absolutely
mhm.
agree, that accountability, that looking at self, and again, that can be very hard, but it's
Yeah,
necessary. We are
absolutely.
so, and I think that that's a cultural expectation that we get caught up in, is protecting the system.
Yes.
I don't,
Yes.
and until you said it, when you said it, I'm like, that is
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
It's like when I look at it in that way, it's easier. It's still not easy, but it's
Right.
easier for
Right.
me to, just kind of be brave
Yeah.
and do what it is that I need to do for the person,
Yes.
because
Right
they're not
there.
even being considered. I'm protecting the system. I
System.
didn't even realize I was doing that, Miss
Right.
Delories.
That's it. Look, me either. Until all these things happen that make you think, wait a minute, or somebody points out some stuff, right? Yeah, we've been protecting family systems and educational systems and political, like we've been protecting the system.
Religious systems.
Yes, religion,
Yeah,
all of that.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, so those are, I mean, of course, I have so many
Right.
other things that I could say and questions that I can
Mm,
ask,
mm.
but I do, want to just thank you for, answering these questions, for you having this conversation with me today.
Thank
Um,
you.
I had such a good time with you. Um,
Yay. We're gonna have to do
uh,
this again. We're gonna do it because I
I
learned a
agree.
lot from you. Okay.
Same. Let T know that we need to do this again.
That's right.
But and I'll let her know too. But I will I'll ask, each guest
Okay.
the two questions.
Okay.
And I want to ask you these two questions before you go. Well, the first question is if there is one seed of wisdom that you could offer to our listeners around tangle roots and things that they can
Mhm.
do to support themselves, Lord, what would that seed be?
Ooh,
Seed of
wow.
wisdom.
Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, I like that question. I'm gonna have to steal it. I mean, borrow it. I might give you credit. I might give you credit for. Okay.
I'm picking up a pattern
Um,
here, Miss Dolores. I don't know.
You know what? Okay, so here we go. I said earlier that I was an and person, and since we've talked so much about family and or roots and tangled roots and all of that, I would say that you can love your family deeply and still choose yourself.
Ooh,
Like two things can exist simultaneously. So I would say you can love your family deeply and
mm,
still choose yourself.
absolutely. That is
Yes.
absolutely true.
Mhm.
Um, okay, the second question: what song, saying, or practice keeps you rooted, especially when family dynamics are heavy?
Oh wow, that's good. Prayer is important to me, and that looks different given the situation. Oh, I
Mhm.
like affirmations. One of the things my daughter does is it's meditation, and so I've been doing more of that. Again, I'm learning so much from my children. But songs, I think a lot. My dad, in addition to being a pastor, he also wrote songs, and one of the songs that I
Mm,
love was "You Are Blessed." And so I always reflect on, regardless of what's going on around me. I try to stay in this space of gratitude, and not to say that I don't have challenges and things don't come up, and sometimes right? But I really do try to stay in a space of gratitude, and that song just really resonates. I am blessed, right? And I am, even with all the stuff, because even as I'm sitting up talking to you, one of the things that we can both say is that we had all these tangled roots, and we're sitting up here today talking about them. So number one, we're aware that they took place. We've been working our whole lives trying to untangle some of this stuff,
mhm.
and we've been trying to help others untangle.
Yes.
Wow, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
to me, I don't know what else could, right? I'm blessed in that way. We have the cognitive skills to be able
Yeah.
to try to untangle with help from different sources, these roots, and
Yeah.
we can also be used to help others do the same. To me, that's the life.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love it. Don't you love it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Um,
Absolutely.
it's like it's a song where you said, I like living this kind of life.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm living the best of life.
Come on now. You
We
better
doing it,
sing
D with
that.
the Lords. We doing it. But thank you so much. This has been
Yes.
an absolute pleasure for me. And
Yes,
I'm
for
not
me as
just
well.
saying that. An
Yes.
absolute pleasure. Thank you for tuning to this conversation with us, for your wisdom, your
Mhm.
honesty, and your deep care for generations. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Um,
having me.
Absolutely. And you'll be back. You will
Okay.
be back.
Yeah.
All right, loves, it's time for Tend to It. This week's practice invites reflection and honesty. Write a letter, sent or unsent, to someone in your family. In that letter, name two things. One, what are you carrying forward? And two, what are you choosing to release? There's no pressure to resolve everything. This is about acknowledgement, not perfection. Write it, sit with it, tend to it. In our next episode, we'll continue exploring how boundaries, self trust, and care help us grow, even when the soil is complicated. Let's close the way we opened. Inhale and exhale. Remember, tangle roots don't mean you're broken. They mean you've been growing. So be it, tend to it. This podcast reflects my personal reflections and professional insights as a licensed therapist, but it is not a substitute for therapy. The conversations and practices shared here are for educational and inspirational purposes only. If you are seeking mental health support, I encourage you to connect with a licensed therapist in your area who can provide individualized care. Tend to It is a production of Black Unicorn Productions. This episode was executive produced by Aiysha Williams. Special thanks to you, our community, for showing up and tending to it with us. Until next time, remember, the soil is rich, the seasons will change, and your growth is worth the care that you give. So be it, tend to it.